Year 6 of the Sam Pittman era is about to begin down in Arkansas. Will it be a make or break season for him there for the Razorbacks in 2025? We're going to talk about it next on the College Huddle. And joining me here on the College Huddle is Caleb from Hogs on the Hill podcast, a member of the College Huddle. Caleb, thanks for joining me. Let's talk some Razorback football, buddy.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I look forward to this. This upcoming season, like you said, it's going to be interesting for sure because you've almost got a divided fan base, and I'm ready to get into it and see what's going to happen this year.
Yeah, when you have, I think most fans of college football will have at some point in their fandom a time when the team or the school they follow has a situation where the head coach is kind of in a make or break year, and you got half the fan base kind of pulling that he fails and half the fan base pulling that he succeeds, and it's an odd situation to be in, and especially on this side of the microphone, that you will, that placating to that fan base where it's split on a situation like that. Let's go back a little bit, Caleb, and kind of talk about how we got here. I think that's a fair place to start. Sam Pittman comes in and takes over this program and really earned the opportunity to prove himself in Arkansas. So let's start back at the beginning and then maybe kind of catch everybody up to speed who's not following the Razorbacks from day to day on how we've gotten to this situation.
Yeah, so you look at when Sam Pittman came in, you had the terrible 2 years of Chad Morris that, it was just, from an Arkansas perspective, just terrible. And then, you get through that. Sam Pittman comes in, kind of is wanted to be the guy that could come in, steady the ship, and kind of work on getting this program back on the up and up, if you will. So, he was a guy that has Arkansas ties before, previously coached the offensive line at Arkansas before he left and went to Georgia, spent his time at Georgia, and then, got the opportunity to come back, had a lot of former players advocating that, yeah, this is a great move, bring him in. And, he came in, had a, few great years, kind of got Arkansas back to, a decent level, 500, plus one wins. You come in, that's great year 1, 2, 3, but then you want to start seeing improvement. And that's when you kind of had a little plateau. He kind of reached that peak one year, having a really great season, and then kind of went back down and has gotten to that point of where the past few years it's been, you finish the season 500, maybe one win above, you get a bowl game, and check mark success, at the end of the day. But now, like you said, in year 6, you want to take that jump. The fans want more. You've gotten the program back into a decent spot after kind of being so low for those 2 years, and now there's question marks around. Can Pittman be the guy to do it? He's brought in, former Arkansas head coach Bobby Petrino, shocking hire last offseason to come in and manage the offense. And I think a lot of people have been frustrated with Sam Pittman because over the past, 2 to 3 years, our offensive line has been great. He's supposed to be the offensive line guru, one of the top offensive line coaches in the country. And if we're being honest, your offensive line has been pretty terrible the past few years. So going into year 6 with a lot of unknowns, it's just, I like what he's done, gotten the program back to, righted that ship, if you will, got it back to a decent spot. But I need to see more to know that he's the guy to continue to be the captain and run the program.
Sure. Um, what do you think has maybe hindered him from taking the next step? Has it been just the buy-in in NIL from that perspective? Has it been just a lack of resources with that? Or is there something else that you can pinpoint that would cause the next step from not being able to be taken? Maybe some bad coaching hires, some, you know, inability to develop. What's the scenario here?
Yeah, so I think it's a culmination of a little bit of all the above. So, you look at it, we don't have the NIL compared to, some of your other programs in the SEC, your Alabamas, your Georgias, even like Florida. You don't have that type of NIL coming in funding wise. But also, if you look at it, I think some resources in terms of, before Petrino came in, a bad offensive hire, and your OC bringing Danny Nosif, another familiar face that was at Arkansas in a previous stint before, a guy Sam Pittman's familiar with. You bring him in with a returning quarterback. So you have a quarterback in KJ Jefferson that had a great few years for Arkansas. Um, Kendall Browse leaves Arkansas to go to TCU, so you got to bring in a new offensive coordinator. Well, you bring in Dan Enos. Well, his playbook, his play style didn't really fit KJ Jefferson. It was almost trying to put him in a box where that he didn't fit in the scheming and things like that. And so you see that season, Browse or Enos is fired, towards the end of the season before the season's even over. It seems like not that KJ's given up, but that he might be checked out a little bit. He doesn't seem to be running as hard as what he normally would be, or maybe um, some of the plays he would have made the year before haven't been being made. And nothing against KJ. I don't blame the guy after, the year you've had, the offensive line struggles where, you don't have time to hardly make a read, read the defense, see your receivers through, things like that. So I think it's a culmination between funding, maybe some bad coaching hires. And I wouldn't say it's buying, but you have a lot of guys in today's age with NIL transfer portal that um, maybe weren't getting the playing time they wanted, but if they would have stuck it out, next year would have been the year. Some talented players that have come out of the program, some that have come in and really found their groove or their niche. But at the end of the day, I think sometimes fans, especially Arkansas, can have unrealistic expectations because Arkansas football is never going to be an Alabama or Georgia. Every probably 4 to 5 years, you could have a 9-10 win season. And I'm not saying I'm happy with that being the ceiling, if you will, but unless we have a lot more support, NIL, and especially with all this revenue sharing now, we're not necessarily going to get to that level. There'd be a lot of things that need to happen for that. I mean, facilities here are great. You look at what facilities we've gotten. We have our football center that was, designed and helped paid for by alumni. Jerry Jones, owner of the Cowboys, and so our facilities, stadium, fantastic. But when it comes to the rest of it, I just don't know if Arkansas is necessarily up to par with, that top end of the SEC where a lot of people are wanting to see Arkansas.
Yeah. It seems like from a national perspective that when people think of the SEC, you've got Bama, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida, and then you got your kind of the next programs like the Ole Miss, who's making more noise lately, in that regards. LSU, of course, I should have mentioned them as well. Sorry, LSU fans. I'm sure I'm already going to see that in the comments. Uh, uh, get a podcast in the College Huddle, then we maybe will show you some more respect, LSU. Everybody we ask, they just they want to stay to themselves down there. But the point being is Arkansas's usually not the school nationally that gets mentioned, but I can remember watching Arkansas do a number on a lot of those SEC schools. And it is a place where you can win. We've seen it before. It maybe not at the consistent level of some of those other programs, but Arkansas is definitely a place where you can go down there and you can win a lot of football games, and you can succeed, and you can be, especially in this new era where 12, soon to probably be 16 teams in the playoffs, where Arkansas says, yeah, we can be a playoff team. And I think from if I'm understanding you, engaging your fan base, those who I've interacted with before, that's the goal. We want to be in a place to where now we can compete to get in the college football playoff, which means we need to be probably one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the SEC. Last year, you were at 11th, tied for 11th in the conference. So, not there. Want to see that next step. What has Sam Pittman done this offseason to try to take that next step to get in the argument of, yeah, we're competing to be in the 12-team playoff and soon to be 16-team playoff?
I think part of it starts with you look like you have consistency. You have the same offense coordinator back. You have your same starting quarterback. Statistically, in the past, you've seen year 2 under Bobby Petrino, the offense is much better. It was great last year between the 20s, but you get in the red zone, and it just seemed like, you know, I don't know, we forgot how to run plays, we forgot how to block, or the offense just kind of fell apart. But if you look between the 20s, we were one of the top offenses across the country in yards, scoring points if it's not in the red zone, if we have big plays, and just putting up great statistical things, but that didn't necessarily equate to wins. The one that drives me nuts, even still to this point, is you look at Oklahoma State last year. Arkansas has that game in hand, but a few odd, weird mistakes. A guy fumbles a punt. Our quarterback gets sacked, and his arm gets hit, and so the ball is short armed. For an interception, the ball doesn't go your way, and you have a great game. It's in hand statistically. You're kind of running the game, and it just falls apart. And that seems to be the trend over the years for Arkansas. But then, that game happens last year. Then you look at it, you turn around, Tennessee comes in here, and you get the upset win. And honestly, I feel like that's probably the win that saved Pittman's job last year. You get a marquee win like Tennessee on the road, like that comes here. They're top national ranked. You weren't really picked to win that game, and you pull that off. But I think the big thing that is going for this season is that consistency from you have your offensive coordinator back, your D coordinator back. Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns in some of those position groups, but you have some consistency here. They went out and did some work in the portal addressing the offensive line concerns, went and got some of the top portal guys out there. But I think the consistency is going to be key, and he's really advocated that the whole new revenue sharing that just got passed through legislation will really help this team in terms of being able to go out and pay these guys a little bit more. Arkansas was one of the last few teams in the SEC that went out and got themselves a GM, but we have a GM now, and so Pittman's also glad to say, all right, here, you handle all this NIL negotiation money stuff. I'm a coach football. And maybe that's what he needs to do more of, instead of having to deal with kids coming to him saying, can I renegotiate my deal? Can I, get more money? Instead, be like, all right, go talk to the GM. And then that way he can maybe focus, be a little bit more hands-on with the offensive line. He's letting Bobby Petrino kind of do his thing, run the offense, kind of all hands off unless it's maybe offensive line specific. And so, I think those things could equate to success if you have some of the personnel that will step up this year to fill some shoes from what you lost last year. You think, you lose wide receiver Andrew Armstrong, the leading yards receiver in the SEC last year. You lose Landon Jackson, one of the top defensive ends in the country, to the NFL, drafted by the Buffalo Bills. You lose a few other pieces, your Isaac Tesla drafted by the Lions, 2 of your top receivers. You have a few guys hit the transfer portal and go to in-division rival in Ole Miss. And so, you got to do a little retooling, but I think that consistency with coordinators and maybe those key spots like On offense, Taylor Green, your captain of the offense is back, so you're not having to adjust to a new guy. On the defensive side of the ball, you have Xavier Sorey that decided to come back for another year, who can kind of be a key cog in that defense, that defensive captain that can kind of run and help all the new guys as the season gets started. So I think there's some things going for Arkansas, but you also need some other guys to step up in the wide receiver room and the secondary on the defensive line. Some of those spots that, you have big shoes to fill.
Sure, sure. I just took a quick glance at last year's result. Out of the losses that you suffered, only two of them were by more than 10 points. You were in every single football game except for two.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not like Arkansas's that far away here. Just a few more tweaks, few more things here, and you're there. You're right there competing where you guys want to be. Um, do you feel like the fan base kind of feels that, and that's maybe a little bit of why there's a little bit of a we need to see this type of results this year type of feeling?
I think there's a little bit that they see the talent is there.
Yeah.
And to your point, most games were 10 points or less last year, where up right until the end, you're right there with a chance to win. And being a fan and season ticket holder and everything, and being in a lot of these games, it just seems like if you can clean up some of those late game like poor decisions or things like that, maybe you win 1 to 2 more games. And it's going to take a little bit of luck too. The ball's going to have to bounce your way sometimes, and it seems as an Arkansas fan that's far and few between. It just seems like when it comes down to that, whether it be Arkansas getting a call to go their way, or Arkansas, they get that last minute needed interception, or, I can remember we were in a close game with Texas last year. Well, they fumbled the ball, but ironically enough for Arkansas, it just rolled out of bounds. So they maintained possession where, in our case, it's fumbled and they recover the ball. And, you know, it just seems that those things never go Arkansas's way. And I know you can't blame that on everything, but it always takes a little bit of luck for
Yeah.
some of these teams to get where they go. But I think part of it's cleaning up some of those decision making things, and I think being in a consistency with your offense coordinators will help that. But also, it's going to be up to Taylor Green to perform. Petrino can coach him up all he can, but he's still got to get out on the field and have the performances needed to have success.
Is Arkansas a dangerous team this year?
If the pieces fall right, I think so. We on our last show went and kind of talked through this schedule. Talking through this schedule actually makes me not as worried as I was when you look through your schedule and some of the programs, like we open conference play with Ole Miss. Well, it's year one, no Jackson Dart, with their projected starter being a guy that has never really started in an SEC game before, is 19 years old, even though he's been in school for a few years. And so there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve there. You look at some of the other games that you talked through, the Tennessee game. Doesn't look as scary now that Nico's gone. They have a brand new quarterback as well. So some of these other factors with these schools, when you talk about and really look into it, makes it not as bad as what you initially thought, 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting you say that. Let's just do it. Let's just go through the schedule now. Great transition, Caleb. It's like you've podcasted a few times before or something.
Maybe just a little bit.
All right, let's dive into this thing here. And the object of doing this, Caleb, is to try to get a pulse for those of us who like to put a little dime on things before the season starts. I like to try to find where my best bets are before the season to pay for a family vacation. That's my goal every year, and so I like to find the where the best numbers are at. So, all right. That being said, We opened the season against Alabama A&M, and then Arkansas State, so in-state foe there. Those should be 2 wins to start the year off. Yes, agree.
Yes, and the only hesitancy I have is with Arkansas State, with it being in Little Rock. Arkansas historically doesn't play the best in Little Rock, even though it's technically a home field of sorts, but not really. This is a matchup that a lot of not Arkansas fans, but Arkansas State fans have wanted for years. I mean, you see it across the country with, almost every other big program in the country. They play their in-state, you know, little brother, if you will, on a regular basis. And this is going to be one of the first times Arkansas has done it in a really long time, if at all. And so this is one of those where you can't be overlooking this game. You can't afford to lose this game in terms of it doesn't look great when you're on the hot seat, if you will, if you're the head coach, but then you've got the in-state school that also wants to come there and show them that that they can compete as well. And so I would say, from a standpoint of talent and everything like that, yes, you should win those first 2 games, but don't go sleepwalking into that Arkansas State game, or you could be on the wrong side of that scoreboard.
Touche. Gotcha, man. That absolutely could happen. All right, you mentioned it. You alluded to it before. Opening SEC play on the road at Ole Miss. This is going to be a under the lights game, prime time game. Ole Miss took you to the woodshed last year, and you mentioned it. This one kind of feels to me, if I'm reading the room right, that there's a little bit of a come on, we want a little bit of a revenge game here, a little bit.
Yeah, and there's several factors that go into it. Like you said, the beating that we took last year, Jack Stark coming in, slicing and dicing our secondary on our home field wasn't a great feeling. But then you also look at it, weird things happen in Oxford, several years ago. You have the 4th and 25 that happens. It's the series have just been weird back and forth. And on top of that, you have 3 former Arkansas players that this offseason transferred to Ole Miss. A lot of people are saying it was because of money. I can't confirm or deny that myself, but I think some of these teams or some of these players that were teammates with those guys are going to want to, be like, get that win and be like, see, guys, we're not as bad as maybe you thought we would be, and get the win here. And it's always fun to beat Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. It's just they're one of those programs that sometimes seem like they're a little big for their britches sometimes. And it's week 3 on the road, opening SEC really early in the schedule this year. So there's an interesting storylines to go along with this matchup.
Yeah, no doubt. Interesting game here. The following week, back to back. I guess you could say back to back to back road games away from Fayetteville. At Memphis. Um, how'd that happen? How'd that fall on the schedule that way?
That's an interesting that me and my co-hosts were talking about the other day. Is like, we wonder if that might have been a tie-in to get a basketball deal done for a matchup with them. But at the end of the day, very similar to Arkansas State. They're close ties to Arkansas. Not that far of a drive from Little Rock, Central Arkansas. You probably have a lot of Arkansas kids that maybe didn't get an Arkansas offer. They went to play for Memphis. I think proximity. And so that's an interesting one. When this one popped up on the schedule this year, I was like, all right, we're playing Memphis. And then to see part 2 of that is it's a road game. Normally games like this are going to be home for the bigger school, if you will. And, you look at Memphis, they're not a slouch either. You look at the season they had last year, pretty decent season last year. And
Very
so
good
this
season.
one's one of those 2 where, you come out of that Ole Miss game, there's more pressure if you lose that game. But, this is another one where you can't overlook it to the game that's huge ahead of that. And so, this is going to be one of those where if you can beat Ole Miss, carry that momentum over, get the win, honestly, on your way home from Ole Miss, you just need to stop, and there's no point in coming all the way back to Fayetteville to travel back over to Memphis. So, you know, it could be a crucial game in the season because it's probably one of the games on the schedule that you want to tally up as to not a cupcake, but one of your more winnable games towards the front half of the season because that back half um, potentially could be rough.
Come back home. It's been a while. It's August 30th to September 27th. And in comes Notre Dame. Now, I am I am geographically very close to Notre Dame. I know a lot of Notre Dame fans, and a lot of them deal with me here on the College Huddle. Uh, they are totally overlooking this game. They don't even mention it when they talk about this year's schedule. I have a Caleb. I kid you, I've been looking at everybody's schedules. I feel like you guys could upset the apple cart for Notre Dame in this game, especially if they were to beat A&M and Miami back to back to open their season, and they think we are CFP bound. We're gonna be a top four team. We're gonna get, and then they come down to Fayetteville and Little Arkansas shows them some Southern hospitality, you could say. I feel like you guys can win this football game. I do.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it could go either one of two ways. I don't think there's an in between. Either they're going to come in here and take care of business like they think it's going to happen, or to your point, they might be overlooking this game a little bit. And Arkansas really takes them down to it. And I think part of this is, unfortunately, it's 11 a.m. game. It is on ABC, but I think what a lot of people think is, you know, the year in and year out, Notre Dame doesn't play anybody. Well, you can't necessarily say that this year because, like you just mentioned, look at the two teams they're playing to open up the season. Some top tier programs. So this could be an interesting matchup where if the pieces fall right, you're looking at a potential top 25 matchup. You know, Arkansas is say 4-1 or 3-1, 4-0 coming into this game. You know, like you said, Notre Dame wins their opening games against Miami, Texas A&M, and whoever else they have before this. You're potentially talking about a ranked matchup. So, you know, if there's some pieces fall into place, you're looking at a really interesting matchup here. But like you said, Arkansas usually has at least one game per season that, you know, that they're not expected to win or they, you know, or compete, just kind of like Tennessee last year. This could be one of those games where they win a game they're not supposed to. And I think you're going to really find that out in those first four games on what you've got offensively and be able to scout the other team. And, you know, our defensive coordinator, Travis Williams, is very aggressive defensive play caller. He likes to bring some pressure, blitzes, and you know, not any shot to Notre Dame, but I mean, you've got some SEC caliber athletes against, you know, an independent non-conference school. Not saying they don't have great athletes, but you know, I think we've seen time and again over, you know, the years. It's a little bit different in the SEC as far as physicality, running the ball, just kind of wearing you down, things like that. So this one's one to keep circled, most definitely. I'm excited about this game, that it's a home game this year. I know it's a home and home, so we'll be in Notre Dame next year. But to have this on the schedule, I just wished there wasn't nearly a month apart between home games.
Indeed. Indeed. Bye week, number one. And then you go up to Knoxville and talk about revenge. They are gonna be out for blood for this one, buddy. Now it didn't prevent them from going to the college football playoff last year, but they did not have a good day in Arkansas last year. I gotta feel like this is one of those games where you guys have circled and tighten up the chin straps a little extra tight, boys. This one's going to be one of those helmet knocking games.
Yeah, most definitely. Like you said, after last year, what happened in Fayetteville, they're going to want to get that win back. And as I alluded to earlier, to me as an Arkansas fan, this game is not near. I don't want to say scary, but as daunting as it was before Nico left. All right,
Sure.
so the Maliava saga happens back, in earlier in the spring. Nico leaves. Arkansas has some ties to that because his little brother Madden enrolled at Arkansas and was going to be a freshman this year. He up and leaves to join his brother at UCLA as well. Well, now Tennessee is kind of scrambling to go in the portal and find a quarterback and or see who on their roster, and not to mention Nico mentioned he was or announced he was transferring the day before the spring game. So they had very little time to prepare. Um, they have all the rest of the offseason to prep, but now with one of the top quarterbacks, not in your program anymore, this game is, the odds go more towards your favor than what it was if it would have been, oh, you have Nico there, another year experienced, same coaching staff, you have some weapons and things like that. So um, this one's going to be an interesting one to say the least because Tennessee is going to have that let's get revenge, and then Arkansas is going to probably come into it with a chip on their shoulder saying, all right, depending on what happens in that Notre Dame game, you have a week to rest up and either, you know, an extra week to celebrate a big win or, an extra week to go back to the drawing board. And, if it's a loss, figure out what do we need to change? What do we improve before going on the road? What will be a tough battle no matter what, because the environment at Knoxville can get crazy. But with a new quarterback under center, there's just a lot of unknowns from that perspective.
Absolutely. All right, man. Let's keep her trucking here. I kind of want to throw these next three together. A&M, Auburn, Mississippi State, all at home. I feel like if Arkansas is going to take that step, they've got to make hay right here. You need to take advantage of playing A&M at home. And then I think Auburn and Mississippi State are both two teams. Getting them at home, you need to win. By the way, is there a more annoying trip in the SEC than going to Mississippi State?
It's tough because I have that experience. I went in college to Mississippi State.
Oh, are you a Mississippi State grad?
No, as far as I went on a trip to
Oh,
a
okay.
game in
Okay, gotcha.
at Mississippi State, and it was, you know, it's really hard to explain those cowbells without experiencing it in person. And this was in the heyday when Mississippi State was actually decent and they had Dak
Oh,
Prescott. So it wasn't just an average Mississippi State team. It was one of the few years that they were pretty successful under Dan Mullen with Dak Prescott. But yeah, to your point, it's very frustrating, and I'm glad that game isn't home this year. But you're looping these three together. A&M is an interesting one because this is going to be the first game in several years that this game's not in Jerry World, down in Dallas Cowboy Stadium. It's finally moving back to a home and home. You have a little asterisk there during COVID where A&M technically got a home game because, we weren't traveling to a neutral location and things like that. But, I think a lot of Arkansas fans are going to want to show up for this one. I know my wife especially. This is, her most hated rivalry or, from her perspective. Just because it seems like up until just, a couple years ago, that matchup in Jerry World it was always a great matchup overtime, but it always seemed like A&M had Arkansas's number. Well, now you get them in Fayetteville this year with the full force of your crowd. The last time we played A&M in Fayetteville was in 2013, my freshman year of college, whenever they had Johnny Manziel and that whole experience. So to finally get them in a non-neutral site game is going to be fun. I know they've got some experience returning. Marcel Reed kind of come onto the scene middle of the season last year, had a great end of the season. That's going to be a great matchup to see. They're always tough defensively. Auburn, you never know what you're going to get with Auburn, but here recently their program just hasn't been great. They did go out and get Jackson Arnold from Oklahoma, who's a talented quarterback. Just didn't work for him there. But I don't know if they have all the pieces to kind of. I don't know how much improvement you're going to see from last year to this year. And then Mississippi State, kind of same situation. Um, the whole situation with Mike Leach and his passing really threw a wrench into their program because they invested a lot into having him come and take over and kind of try to rebuild that program after the years, Dak and Dan Mullen move on. And then, it's been a rough go for them. But, to your point, this 3 stretch games of home games, you really need to win all these games. Especially like you said, if you want to make that next step, you got 3 opportunities here to take advantage of that. Especially say you win Alabama, A&M, Arkansas State, you get these 3 wins. That's 5 right there. Okay. Between the rest of the schedule, Ole Miss, Notre Dame, Tennessee, and the ones we're going to talk about here in a little bit, win a couple more, maybe 3, and then that's going to be a massive improvement for this coaching regime and alleviate some pressure for Sam Pittman.
Yeah. All right, moving forward here. Let's look at these last 3. These next after a bye on November 8th, at LSU, at Texas. 2 of the better, I guess, more highly ranked teams heading into the season this year as far as preseason rankings are going. Those if you can win one of those 2 as a major upset, that would be the feather in the cap, and probably as long as you take care of business in the last game, you're going to the college football playoff. If it all falls well, like you're saying, and you're looking at 9-3, 10-2, I would say you have a very good argument for the CFP. But you're going to have to win one of those 2, more than likely. That would be difficult to do. And then, of course, you got Missouri at home to finish off the season. Talk to me about those 3. What are Arkansas fans? What are you thinking about what is going to be a tough stretch right there at the end?
Yeah, I hate these being back-to-back road games, but that's how the chips fall sometimes in the SEC. You at least be thankful that you don't have an Alabama or a Georgia on the schedule for the second consecutive year. But these Texas and LSU are no slouch either. LSU, the one thing you can look at as a positive is at least you don't have to play at night in Death Valley. Is this is a 11 a.m. to noon game. So you don't have to worry about, playing in Death Valley at night, which is one of the toughest things to do. But Arkansas has actually made it a game the past few years that they played at LSU. Garrett Nussmeier returning under center. They always seem to put together a squad. Brian Kelly, kind of like how his tenure at Notre Dame went, always has really great seasons, but always seems to lose 1 or 2 that he probably shouldn't, or things like that. And maybe this is one Arkansas can get fired up and go on the road. You have Mississippi State and then a bye week to prep, so you an extra prep week. Can that help you? And then you go into Texas. Year 2 of Texas being in the SEC. A historic rivalry for Arkansas fans. I like to. My dad tells me about the old Southwest Conference days and how this was a big time rivalry. The past few meetings with Texas, it was a close game last year, but they still got the win. And then when you played them previously, they came into Fayetteville and you ran them back on the bus. And so now you're going to Texas. This is going to be an interesting squad this year. You've got year 1 under Arch Manning. There's a lot of pressure there from that side of things. Is like if he really lives up to all the expectations and hype they're putting onto him, this could be a really good Texas team this year. But also, I've seen the argument of, well, if he's that good, then why was he behind Quinn Ewers last year? Fair point.
That's a fair question.
So it's one of those things where, all right, it's his time to prove it, if you will, and show, all right, is he the next, big Manning player that in that lineage, Peyton, Eli, even his father that unfortunately due to some injury issues didn't get to play, have a big career. But you have 2 uncles that are Super Bowl and winning quarterbacks. that's the best help in coaching you can grow up with. So now it's make or break time for you in your career here at Texas, and then Missouri. This game is, I like to argue, everybody wants to call it a rivalry, but to me, it's a manufactured rivalry. You can't just build a trophy and say, all right, and name a game the Battle Line rivalry and call it a actual rivalry. To me, growing up, historically, it's been LSU. You have the Battle of Golden Boot. Growing up, it was always on this day, the last game of the season, the day after Thanksgiving. And I think it needs to go back that way. But it's just hard to get behind um, a rivalry that there's really no history behind, other than I don't know who came up with the idea of saying, okay, these states have bordering, state lines. Let's call this a battle line rivalry, and voila, you have a new rivalry to play on Rival Week. It's hard to get into. People on the Missouri side try to argue, well, it's not a rivalry when we win every year, but I don't think that's what necessarily always makes up a rivalry. It's some of the history between, you think about all the amazing games that have happened between Arkansas and LSU, the McFadden days, and the Les Miles days of LSU, and how those programs that seem to be where no matter how good or bad each team was, throw the records out the window, because that it was always a hard fought game between these two schools. And so Missouri, it's going to be interesting to see what they got this year. New quarterback for them. They lost some weapons on the offensive side of the ball. Let's see what Coach Drink can do, retooling, and can they get back to where they were a couple of seasons ago.
All right, it's time to put you on the spot, Caleb. I want the absolute worst case scenario in the basement floor for this season, and give me your best case scenario. Everything falls right, but being realistic, ceiling for the Hogs in 2025.
So absolute basement. I think Arkansas finishes below 500, and Pittman's fired midseason. You get to either after the Notre Dame game, Tennessee, Texas A&M, somewhere in that realm. Things aren't going right. Arkansas fans are frustrated. The staff, the Yurachek AD, the AD has to make a decision. Pitman gets let go. Petrino's the interim for the rest of the season, and maybe you get back to 500 if you're lucky through the rest of the schedule. I think that's probably what you're looking at is, your basement floors 500 or below, with more than likely Pittman getting the axe midseason if that's the case. Peak ceiling, I think this team could go, if everything falls into place like you would like it to. You could see 9-3 and be on the verge of a playoff push. There's just, this is a tough schedule, and that stretch right there at the end of the season with LSU and Texas are going to be key games, because more than likely there's going to be top 15, top 10 ranked at that point. And you're going to be fighting them for a potential spot in the college football playoffs. And so if things fall perfectly, maybe 10-2 as well. But there's going to be, Arkansas is going to have to find some favor with Lady Luck, and things are going to have to really go their way. Guys are going to really have to step up in terms of personnel wise. And it would almost take, not saying it can't happen, but you see a big jump for Taylor Green under year 2 of Bobby Petrino. He puts himself in the Heisman race. He's having an historic season to that magnitude, for things like this to happen.
Hey, ain't nothing wrong with holding hands with Lady Luck, buddy. There ain't nothing wrong with that, my man.
Not at all.
Oh, that was a lot of fun. All right. After it's kind of weird. I look at this, and you don't really know unless, like I said, you're following a team in and out every single day, what someone's thinking or what their perspective of. But it's good to finally get your perspective because I've just kind of been feeling like this feels like the year that Arkansas does something. And, uh, you know, just because people aren't saying, hey, that's the team that should, take the next step doesn't mean it won't happen. And so I'm interested to see how this goes for you guys. Um, Arkansas has the best mascot in the SEC, right? I mean, it's not even close.
100%.
Everything else is so lame. We have tigers. How many tigers need to be in the SEC? Come on,
Exactly.
tigers, a gator. A gator's
These
unique,
are all
but it's
common animals that you can
yes.
find everywhere.
I mean, a razorback, a hog, man. That is, I love good, unique nicknames, and I feel like that one is, volunteer is good, but I can go do that at the soup kitchen. You know what I'm
Right. It's
saying?
like, yeah, what's really the definition there? Whereas you think about a razorback, I mean, you've got a 300 plus wild animal that, fans can see week in and week out during the football season at home games, and just casually go feed them grapes. What's more fun than feeding a razorback some grapes at before a game?
As long, as long, as long as it's not fermented, man. You get a drunk razorback running around. It might be a bad day for somebody. I love it, dude.
Hey, you
I
see
love it.
plenty of those too.
I bet you do. Well done, my man. Oh, this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking to you, Caleb. Tell everybody, maybe they're an Arkansas fan and they just stumbled upon this and they're just seeing you for the first time, or maybe they're just a fan of college football and they liked what you had to say. Tell everybody where they can find Hogs on the Hill.
Yeah, so you can find us at, mainly our not mainly, but our biggest YouTube page, Hogs on the Hill. We do 2 live shows a week, one on Sunday, one on Thursday. All the social medias, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you're in one of those people that use Blue Sky, we're there too. Hogs on the Hill, across the board there. Um, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Check us out. I mean, we talk more than football. We do talk a lot of football, but baseball, basketball, softball, volleyball, soccer, you name it. We try to cover it here at Hogs on the Hill. So yeah, come check us out. We'd love to have you join the show, join the comments. Like he said, like Eric said, if you're just even a football fan and you want to figure out what Arkansas is all about, come check us out. Give us a shout, and we'd love to have you over here at Hogs on the Hill.
All else fails, go to thecollegehuddle.com. That's thecollegehuddle.com. Scroll over the SEC. You don't have to go down very far. Arkansas, there you'll find them. Hogs on the Hill, you'll find links to all their social media as well as their YouTube channel, etc. Go give them a sub. By the way, if you're an Arkansas fan and you've watched this, you've got to this part of the show. By all means, you like what you're hearing, subscribe to the channel. We would absolutely appreciate your patronage here at the College Huddle. It doesn't cost you anything. It's absolutely free. Plus, we want to know what you all think about what we think down in the comment section below. Leave us a comment. Let's have a discussion about Arkansas and the SEC this upcoming season. We'd love to chat with you guys. And again, we appreciate all of you taking the time to do that. All right, Caleb, I've been asking this question of every single person I interview the first time here on the College Huddle. If I were to take a trip down to Arkansas and I would to put on my Arkansas red, shade of red here, I have a lot of scarlet, so I don't know if that would fit well down there with your guys' color, but maybe I could get away with it. And I want to fit in with you and the rest of the Hogs. What's the chant? What's the hand signal? What do I need to do to fit in? Is it go Hogs? Is that what y'all say?
If you're casually walking by somebody, it's if you see somebody out of state or even in town, and it's a casual woo pig.
Woo
And then
pig.
of course, calling the Hogs. All the videos you see about that's one of the biggest ones, and I think most unique traditions, if you will, for Arkansas. So yeah, that's a big one. I've been on many a vacation wearing my Arkansas gear, and you're casually walking or doing something, and a fellow Arkansas fan walks by and it's just like woo pig, and It's
I
just one of those
like
things.
that. I like that. I like what Arkansas's. I like what y'all putting down. I'm picking that up. I like the mascot. I like the color. Woo pig. That's I like it, man. Thank you so much, Caleb. I appreciate it, man. Again, thank you everybody for joining us for this episode. Again, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, ring the bell, get notified every time we drop some new content, and of course, leave us a comment down in the comments section. Until next time, Caleb. Woo pig.
There we go.